What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and what I thought would have been kind of a once-off tactic for Aaron Glenn seems like another trend that's starting to emerge as something that could be replicated multiple times over the course of the regular season after we've seen it implemented twice as off-season, and I'm referring to our captain practices as they're now being called. Rich Cimini recently wrote up about this, and this stems back to something he initiated after the Giants preseason loss, him being Aaron Glenn, where there's a number of different ways you could look at it. One, this could be a bit of an accountability exercise, right? And we'll talk about some of the specifics and everything. Two, this could be a level of buy-in for all of the players. Three, this is an opportunity to see who may be able to rise to those certain levels of leadership, in addition to getting specific looks at what players can separate themselves when they aren't having the coaches, kind of bearing down on them or having to really direct them through everything, right? Who really gets it? Who are things clicking for? Who's standing out head and shoulders above the rest? So let's get into the actual excerpt here that Rich Cimini wrote up, where he mentions, like the first one, there were no assistant coaches, just the players and Coach Aaron Glenn. The players who call their own plays in that setting seem to like those practices. And then in a quote from Quincy Williams, he mentioned it gives the coordinators a chance to see what we like to run or what we're more comfortable playing in and stuff. And he referred to them as being called captain practices now. So I find this really interesting, again, for some of the reasons that I mentioned. One, leadership opportunity. When you look at guys like Sauce Gardner, right, you could argue maybe he was a snub, maybe it's not necessarily his time, but even Sauce Gardner had a good point that when you look throughout the league, there aren't many cornerbacks that you see that are actually referred to as team captains. I think he gave the example of Darius Slay having to wait, 8 or 9 years before he was recognized on a team as one. So it seems like one of those positions where you really just have to put in your time, and unless you're at the Sauce Gardner, Pat Surtain, Richard Sherman, Darrelle Revis type levels, it's probably harder to get it. And in Sauce Gardner's case, I'd probably also argue, he has that allure of kind of trying to build his brand at the same time and stuff. And people could look at that as a little bit more selfish or diva-ish or whatever the factor is. But coming back to these captain practices, I really love these because when you want to talk about the buy-in factor, I've paid attention to a lot of the quotes and interviews that Tom Brady has done since he is retired, and it really gives you a lot of insight into just what made him different, right? Even the way he speaks about winning, speaks about routine, speaks about discipline, speaks about commitment. A lot of it isn't just player speak. It's not just these are the things that everybody says when it comes to winning. His specific examples, his metaphors that he gives out really gives you an understanding in the various levels or degrees to this that you'll see across players. Guys that are just playing and they're just doing what the coaches are saying versus guys that are thinking kind of in this 3D chess realm, right? Where it's, okay, I'm a player right now, I'm learning, I'm trying to get the feel for it, to taking that next step where it's, okay, now I can actually start directing guys and see what I want to do. And then kind of that final level where you become the ultimate field manager, right? And it's now I'm actually working in tandem with my offensive coordinator, my head coach, or my DC as almost a peer with the level of experience I've amassed or the level of success that I've attained. And now it's actually a back and forth. It's a much more collaborative effort where, and that's probably the perfect world setting, right? You get a player, and you hear the coaches talk about this, at least the really good ones, and you hear the players that recognize this speak up. The coaches are just trying to put these guys in the perfect situations, but it's the players that need to go out there and execute. So if you're getting a player that can understand the coach's mentality, the philosophy, what they want to do game plan wise based on talent they have around them or based on skill sets, etc., it's this perfect blend, because now from the player standpoint, the coaches aren't just looking at X's and O's and being devoid of talent and physical matchups and all this kind of stuff. They're actually getting the in-depth reports from the player, the most important guy on the field in and of itself, and the quarterback, for example. And he's getting a chance to really put together a detailed game plan, a detailed scheme, something that's really catered to this guy. And it really just becomes this beautiful piece of magic. And you see when it's done right, first year breakouts, Jaden Daniels, for example. You see guys where it takes a couple of years maybe to click and really take off, like a Jalen Hurts, for example. You have your Patrick Mahomes out there. Peyton Manning, it took him a little bit of time to really get going. So when I look at someone like Justin Fields and you talk about this proposed Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield type resurgence for him, right? Comeback player of the year type situation, if you will. Granted, that's supposed to be for injury. Always should have been the case, but people never really voted for the way it was intended. But when I think about Justin Fields and what that can mean for his game, right? You have a franchise that's fully bought into you. You have a piece to help you have a very elite run game. You have potentially the best offensive line, certainly on paper, that you've had at this point to your career. Number one wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, which, if you consider him a better receiver than DJ Moore, who put up a career year once he got paired with Justin Fields, and you feel really good about what he could potentially do regardless of preseason struggles. And this would just be that next level, right? It's a slower pace setting of being able to get him to that point of coming to the coaches and saying, here's the rundown of everything I really like. Here's the, what I love. Here's things that I don't think we can quite pull off just yet. Let's keep working at it, but try to minimize these kind of play calls, etc., etc. And I think if he obtains that, you're talking about a completely different player, right? Right now, we're still focused on, all right, we're probably looking at short game passing, half field reads or 1-2 reads and go. A lot of RPO stuff with him still. And I think there's definitely a world for that, right? Lamar Jackson is the guy that's doing it at the, highest tier that we've seen it, where you don't question him anytime he's running, whether it's designed, whether it's scrambling, whether it's, just backyard football with him. And you've seen the strides that he's been able to take as a thrower. And even with him, people still criticize some of the stuff like the overthrows and some of the decision making and stuff that'll come with that, and that'll always be there. But Justin Fields seems to have this calmness. He seems to have this focus to want to make sure he's doing everything possible to improve, and that's where it starts. So Aaron Glenn being able to do things like these captain practices and bridge the gap. And I'm still curious, the first time it was mentioned after the Giants loss, it seemed like there was very little to minimal impact. Aaron Glenn was literally a spectator there, and he was just seeing how things were going, were being run and executed on, and different things of that nature. But I'll be interested to see if he slowly brings in the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, for example, or if he keeps it to himself. Does he get a little bit more hands-on? And just with his mentality, I can't imagine, for example, that he is watching this practice and certain things are happening and he's just taking note and making sure he goes back to follow up with the player. He's hands-on, right? I can see him going out there and be like, no, I didn't like the way that you tried to do this jam. This is the technique we want to look for. And then, gives them that teaching moment and then looks to see it implemented again as he goes back to watching. But this could only be a huge plus for us. So I'm really happy to actually hear that this has happened once again. And I do hope that this continues to be a trend. Now, it could be much harder going into the regular season where, you're worrying about game planning. You're still having to do your walkthrough days. There's all the travel stuff that's going to be talked about now. So we probably won't see it for a while. But if it creeps up during like a bye week, or if it's maybe Actually, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't sacrifice a normal practice setting to really implement something like this, but maybe it's something the players hold by themselves, and actually we don't even see Aaron Glenn come and participate in something like that either, right? But we'll see. Let me know what you guys think, though. I think this is only beneficial. I think it's only a benefit is what I mean to say here. I don't really see any drawbacks with this, and hopefully we get some stories, or if the media, for God's sake, finally starts asking some important questions, or at least some new ones, right? Give us something that's actually thought provoking, and it's not just the same nonsense, day in and day out about what a player's doing and all this kind of stuff. But let me know what you guys think. Captain practices, or should they be here to stay? I'll catch you guys again. Peace.